It happened at the dinner table, just as the roast chicken steam curled through the air, mixing with the scent of rosemary and old pine wood. My father set down his knife, looked me straight in the eye, and said it like he was talking about the weather. "You've always been a disappointment." No one breathed. My sister's fork stopped mid-air. My mother's lips trembled without a word, and my son, Noah, just 11, lowered his head, confused, eyes locked on his untouched mashed potatoes. My father picked his knife back up and resumed carving, like he hadn't just cut something open in me that had been fraying for decades. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not there. Not at that table where silence had always meant survival. This wasn't new. My father had spent years reminding me in subtle and not-so-subtle ways that I had failed his expectations, that I didn't measure up to the man he thought I should have become. But this, saying it aloud in front of my son, felt like something broke for good. The old family home in Albany had that familiar creak of worn floorboards and the smell of memories soaked into the walls. Photos from the 70s hung slightly crooked. A cuckoo clock he once fixed ticked steadily in the background like it was timing the years we'd lost to pride and silence. My father was an engineer, methodical, precise, unemotional. Everything had a function, a formula, a place, including people. My mother was gentle, warm, but she had long learned to stay quiet, to keep the peace. Every first Sunday of the month we gathered at their house for dinner. Noah loved it, mostly because of Grandma's apple pie and the cousins he barely saw. I went out of duty, not love, definitely not comfort. But that night when he said it, with that flat voice and dry stare, something inside me finally snapped. Not in rage, not in rebellion, but in something deeper. Exhaustion, maybe. The quiet grief of a child still trying decades later to be seen. Driving back home through the rain, the windshield wipers moving like a metronome for my thoughts, Noah asked me quietly, "Dad, does Grandpa hate you?" I didn't know what to say. My hands tightened on the wheel. The streetlights cast long shadows across the dashboard. "No, buddy," I said. "He just doesn't know how to show love right." But it wasn't true, and we both knew it. I didn't sleep much that night. Noah had gone to bed early, but I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee and the light over the stove humming faintly behind me. My wife, Marlene, came down around midnight. She didn't say anything at first, just placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Was it bad again?" she asked softly. I nodded. She didn't press for details. She never did. Marlene had met my father enough times to know the man didn't speak unless it was to correct, to criticize, or to dismiss. And somehow every time I still hoped for something different. I still arrived at that dinner thinking maybe, just maybe, this time he'd ask me how my work was going, or tell me he was proud of Noah, or even just say, "Thanks for coming." I don't know why I kept hoping. Maybe because I was still the boy who stayed up late helping him in the garage, handing him wrenches he never asked for just to feel useful. I learned how to change oil before I learned how to ride a bike. He never praised me, but I thought if I just kept trying, one day he would. I remember once, maybe I was 11 or 12, I got second place in a regional science fair. I built a model wind turbine out of scrap wood and an old ceiling fan. I stood there holding the ribbon like it was a gold medal. He looked at it, then looked at me and said, "Next time try harder for first." I laughed nervously, waiting for the smile that would tell me he was joking. It never came. The next morning after the dinner, Noah was quiet. He sat at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal, turning his spoon slowly in the milk. I sat across from him, unsure if I should bring it up. But he spoke first. "Why does he say things like that to you?" I took a deep breath. Because he doesn't know how to say what he really feels. Or maybe... I hesitated. Maybe he does, and I just don't want to believe it. Noah looked at me in that way only kids can. So direct, so honest it hurts. "You're not a disappointment to me," he said, then went back to his cereal like it was the most normal thing in the world. It hit me harder than I expected. I stood up, walked to the sink, and let the water run cold over my hands. anything to hide the sting behind my eyes. There was something about hearing those words from him that felt heavier than all the silence my father had ever given me. Because Noah meant it. And I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to. Later that week, I found myself driving to work, but missing the exit. I kept going, mind on autopilot, and ended up parked outside the old baseball field where my father used to take me when I was a kid. It was locked up, overgrown, bleachers rusting under the weight of 1,000 summers gone. I sat there watching the wind move through the tall grass, and I remembered one day in particular. I was 8. I struck out in the last inning of the game. We lost. I cried behind the dugout, not because of the loss, but because my father had watched from the stands. I thought he'd be disappointed. He was. On the drive home, I remember him saying, "You can't cry every time life doesn't go your way. Men don't do that." That phrase became a kind of script for how I lived the next 30 years. I didn't cry when I lost my first job. I didn't cry when we buried Marlene's mother. I didn't cry when Noah was born, though my chest ached with joy. But after that dinner and after Noah's quiet defense of me, I started to feel cracks forming in the glass I'd held up for so long. Like grief had found a way to seep in through the smallest fracture. At work, I was distracted. During meetings, my mind wandered. I kept hearing my father's voice, flat matter of fact, "You've always been a disappointment." It played on loop. I told myself I shouldn't care, that I was a grown man with a good job, a family, a home, that I'd built a life without him. But shame is funny. It doesn't respond to logic. It attaches itself to old wounds like vines on a crumbling wall. One night, I found Noah in the garage, going through my old toolbox. He had my hammer in one hand and a crooked smile on his face. "I want to build something," he said. "What do you want to build?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "A box for Grandma. She gave me her old photo of you as a kid." That photo, the one of me at 5 covered in mud, holding a toy truck, smiling like the world hadn't touched me yet. "I think she misses when you were little," Noah said, "before you stopped trying to make Grandpa happy." He didn't say it to hurt me. He said it like he was just thinking out loud, but it felt like someone had opened a window in a locked room. I looked at him, my son with his kind eyes and quiet wisdom, and I realized something I hadn't dared to admit until then. Maybe it wasn't just about what my father had said. Maybe it was about everything I had given up trying to hear something he was never going to say. The next Sunday, I told Marlene I wasn't going to dinner. She didn't ask why. She just looked at me with that steady understanding that comes from years of shared silence. We ordered pizza instead. Noah helped me slice mushrooms in the kitchen, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt like it belonged to us, not like a waiting room between disappointments. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. Not guilt about missing dinner, guilt about feeling relief. It's strange how deep loyalty runs, even to people who don't return it. My father had built himself into my bones like scaffolding, rigid, cold, but essential. Without him, I wasn't sure what parts of me would collapse. That night I found myself in the attic. I don't even remember walking up there. Just the sudden hush of insulation and boxes and the soft creak of beams under my feet. I dug through crates I hadn't touched in years and found the thing I wasn't looking for. A letter, folded, yellowing at the edges. It was addressed to my father. I had written it when I was 17. "Dad, I know I'm not the kind of son you hoped for." I didn't remember writing it. Maybe I never mailed it. Or maybe he gave it back without a word. But reading it felt like meeting a younger version of myself I'd long buried. I had poured so much into those words, longing, hope, the desperate ache of a boy begging to be seen. Marlene came up the steps quietly, saw the letter in my hands. "You found it," she said, almost like she had known it was there. I looked up. "Did I ever send it?" She shook her head. "You wrote it the night before we left for college. You tucked it in your suitcase and then, I guess you forgot." I didn't forget, I just didn't believe he'd read it. That night, after Noah went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same cold coffee, same quiet light, and I read the letter aloud. Not for my father, for myself, for the boy who wrote it. the one who still lived somewhere inside me, and as I read the last lines, "I just want you to be proud of me, even once." I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition. The ghost of my father wasn't in the attic or in his house across town. He was inside me, and he'd been there a long time. I skipped 2 more dinners after that. The invitations still came, texts from my sister, voicemails from my mother, but I didn't answer. I didn't owe them silence, but I didn't have the words either. Every excuse felt like a betrayal of the truth I was finally beginning to name. I needed distance, not out of anger, out of survival. Noah didn't seem to miss it. He liked our new Sunday rituals, walking the dog at the park, pancakes for dinner, movie nights on the couch. There was laughter in our house now, even if it came in small waves. One Sunday afternoon, we passed an old man on a bench, feeding birds with hands that shook. Noah watched him closely. "Do you think he has kids?" he asked. "Maybe," I said. "Why?" He shrugged, chewing on the edge of his hoodie string. "He looks lonely." We walked in silence for a while. Then, almost under his breath, he said, "I hope you never end up like that." I stopped, kneeled beside him. "Why would I?" He looked up at me. "Because you always look sad after we visit Grandpa." I didn't know what to say, because he was right, and I hated that he had noticed. I thought I was hiding it well. I thought if I laughed enough, if I asked him about school, if I kept my posture tall, I could contain the grief. But Noah saw through me. That night I took out the letter again, the one I wrote at 17, and placed it in my desk drawer, not to hide it, but to remind myself. That part of me still needed healing, and maybe that healing wouldn't come from my father. Maybe it never would. Marlene sat next to me on the bed, brushing her hair back with tired fingers. "You know," she said, "you don't have to keep chasing something he doesn't know how to give." "I'm not chasing him," I said quietly. "I think I'm just trying to prove to myself that I was worth the effort." She rested her head on my shoulder. "You are. The thing is, when someone spends your entire life convincing you you're not enough, the hardest part isn't proving them wrong. It's believing they were never right to begin with." It was a Wednesday morning when I got the message, a simple text from my sister, Claire. "Dad's retiring. He's having a dinner next weekend. He wants you there." No apology. No acknowledgement of the last time we'd all sat at that table. Just a request like nothing had happened. I stared at the message for minutes, then hours. The weight of it followed me through my day, at work, during lunch, while helping Noah with his math homework. He wanted me there. That was new. I read the message out loud to Marlene that night, and she tilted her head the way she does when she's unsure if something is good or just dangerous in disguise. "Are you going?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. A part of me was curious, a part of me wanted to show up, not for him, but for myself, to sit at that table and not shrink, to see if he'd look me in the eye and remember what he'd said last time. But another part, the deeper, wounded part, felt sick at the thought. I didn't owe him a moment more of my peace, and yet I kept thinking of Noah. I wanted him to see what dignity looked like, what it meant to show up for yourself, even when the world told you not to bother. So I said yes, but on the condition that Noah came with me, not as a shield, not as proof, as witness. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I usually do. I adjusted my shirt collar 3 times. My hands shook just a little. Noah stood in the doorway watching me. "You look nervous," he said. I smiled. "I am." "You don't have to go," he said gently. "I know." I met his eyes. "But I think it's time I stopped letting him decide how I feel about myself." We drove in silence. The house was exactly the same, porch light on, wind chimes clicking softly in the breeze. My mother opened the door, surprised, like she wasn't sure I'd actually come. Inside voices, laughter, glasses clinking. My father sat at the head of the table, already mid-conversation with someone. He looked up, saw me, didn't smile, didn't scowl, just nodded, as if to say, "You're here." It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't ice either. It was something in between. And in that small space I felt something shift. Not in him, in me. I hadn't set foot in that dining room since the night he called me a disappointment. Everything was the same. The heavy oak table, the framed landscape paintings, the chandelier that buzzed faintly when the heat kicked on. But something felt different too. Maybe it was me. Or maybe it was that I wasn't expecting anything this time. No apologies. No approval. Just the truth as it stood. Noah clung close at first. He was watching everyone like he was trying to solve a puzzle no one had explained to him. My sister Claire hugged me tightly, whispered, "Thanks for coming," into my ear. I nodded, unsure if I should say, "You're welcome," or I'm not sure why I did. We took our seats. My father didn't say much. He was dressed more formally than usual, button-down shirt, sleeves rolled. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. But his presence still filled the room in that way it always had, like gravity. Halfway through dinner, someone tapped a glass with a fork. It was Claire. "Just want to say something real quick," she said. "Dad's officially retiring after 42 years at the firm. We wanted to do something special to mark it." Everyone clapped politely. My mother smiled, her eyes glassy. My father looked around the table, his face unreadable. Then he cleared his throat. "I never liked speeches," he said, "so I won't make one." A few chuckles. "But I appreciate you all being here, even the ones I didn't expect." He looked at me when he said it. I felt my throat tighten. Not from the words, from the weight they carried. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement he'd ever offered. But it was Noah who made it unforgettable. Before dessert was served, he stood up. Just stood. All eyes turned to him. My heart jumped. "I know I'm not supposed to make a speech," he said, his voice small but steady. "But I just want to say that my dad is the best man I know. He teaches me how to build things, how to fix things. He always shows up." The room went silent. He turned to me, eyes wide and full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, uncomplicated love. "So, even if Grandpa says stuff that hurts sometimes, I just want my dad to know that he's not a disappointment. He's amazing." Then he sat down. The silence held for a long second. And then, softly, my mother clapped. Claire followed. Then everyone else. A slow, quiet, standing ovation. Even my father gave one nod. Just one. But it was more than I'd ever gotten before. And somehow, in that moment, it was enough. After Noah sat down, I couldn't speak. I didn't even try. My throat was tight, my chest heavier than I expected. I just placed a hand gently on my son's shoulder. He leaned into it without a word, like he knew I needed to feel his warmth more than he needed to hear mine. Dessert came out, my mother's apple pie, the same one she made every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. But that night, it tasted different. Maybe because for once I didn't eat it in silence, or maybe because Noah had peeled back a layer of shame I'd been carrying so long, I forgot it wasn't part of me. My father didn't speak again. He didn't compliment Noah. Didn't acknowledge the speech, but he didn't criticize either. That in our family was almost a miracle. As the plates were cleared, Claire offered to walk Noah to the car so I could say goodbye in private. I wasn't sure what I'd say, or if I'd say anything at all, but I followed my father into the kitchen where he stood rinsing plates like it was just any other night. "You raised a good kid," he said without turning around. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was a compliment. He had given those to other people's children before, just never to me, but because he said it without hesitation, like it was fact, like it didn't cost him anything. I didn't answer right away. "I try," I finally said. He shut off the faucet, turned, dried his hands slowly with the same checkered dish towel I remembered from my childhood. "He's got your kindness," he added, "but he's stronger than you were at that age." It was praise and insult in one breath. "Typical." Still I nodded. "He has Marlene's steadiness," I said, "and some of Claire's courage. He's more than I ever was." My father didn't respond. He looked down at the floor, then back at me. "You came tonight," he said finally. I did. Didn't think you would. I wanted to say I didn't want to, or I'm not here for you. But none of that felt true anymore. I came because my son deserved to see me show up. He looked at me for a long time, that unreadable stare. Then quietly, I didn't know how to do that. The words didn't hit like an apology. They weren't warm, but they were honest. And somehow, that mattered more. I left that night with a strange calm. No big breakthroughs, no tears, just the quiet knowledge that something had shifted. Maybe not between us, but within me. On the drive home, Noah fell asleep in the back seat. I glanced at him through the mirror and thought, maybe this is how it starts. Not with change, but with the choice to stop waiting for it. A few days later, I found myself opening that desk drawer again. The letter I'd written at 17 was still there, folded neatly, edges softened by time. I unfolded it slowly, reading the words I once wrote as a boy, desperate to be seen. I know I'm not the kind of son you hoped for, but I'm trying. I really am. That sentence, so raw, so full of hunger, it ached to read. I could almost feel the ink trembling in my younger hand, the weight of needing to matter to someone who never said I did. I pulled out a pen and wrote another letter, this time not to him, but to myself, to the boy I used to be. You did try. You tried so hard. And you didn't fail. You just weren't seen. That was never your fault. I sat with that truth for a long time. Then I folded the new letter and placed it next to the old one. Two voices, 25 years apart. Neither angry, just tired of waiting. That night I told Marlene, I'm thinking of sending the old letter to him just once, no explanation, just letting him see it. She paused. Would you want a response? No, I said, but maybe it's time I stopped protecting him from the truth. The next morning I mailed it. No return address, no note, just a 17-year-old boy's truth, finally released from the attic. Days passed, then a week. No reply, no mention. Until one Sunday morning, Noah came back from checking the mailbox with a small unmarked envelope in his hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no greeting, no signature, just 10 words. I didn't deserve the grace you gave me back then. I read it twice, then again. The handwriting wasn't his. The typewriter font told me this had taken effort, deliberation. And for the first time in my life, my father had acknowledged my pain, not with blame, not with excuses, but with a single sentence of truth. I sat down on the porch, letter in hand, wind moving soft through the trees. Noah sat beside me. Was it from Grandpa? I nodded. Is it an apology? I thought about that, then shook my head. No, but it's something real. Sometimes real is more healing than perfect. A week after the letter arrived, I went back to the house. Not for dinner. Not because I was invited, but because my mother had called about a box she found in the basement, old school papers, drawings, and a few dusty photo albums she thought I might want. When I got there, the house felt quieter than usual. My father was out, she said, running errands. I wasn't sure if that was her way of giving us space or him giving me his. Either way, I was grateful. We sat on the living room floor, sifting through the past. Faded crayon drawings, a fourth-grade report on the solar system, a photo of me, Claire, and our dog Max on the front steps, all gap-toothed smiles and scraped knees. You were always the quiet one, my mother said, running a hand over the spine of a yearbook. Quiet or scared? I asked, only half joking. She looked at me for a long moment. Maybe both. It wasn't said with blame, just sadness, the kind that mothers carry when they realize their love wasn't always enough to buffer the cold from someone else's shadow. After she went to make tea, I wandered down to the basement. It still smelled like cardboard and old rainwater. I moved boxes aside, tracing the dust lines of forgotten decades. And there, near the water heater, I found it. An old metal toolbox. Not mine, his. I opened it expecting rusted nails, old wrenches, but inside was something else entirely. A candle, still wrapped in tissue paper, wax slightly melted on one side, taped to it, a small folded note. For Daniel, the day he made the baseball team. I froze. That had been 8th grade. The day I got the call, I waited all night for him to say something. He didn't. Just went to bed early. I remember going to sleep thinking maybe he hadn't cared at all. But he had bought a candle and never gave it to me. I sat there, cross-legged on the concrete floor, holding that candle like it was a relic from another lifetime. So much silence. So many almosts. When my mother called down to ask if I'd found the box, I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the candle, feeling both the warmth of what could have been and the ache of what wasn't. Later that night, I lit it in my living room. Noah asked what it was for. "Something Grandpa never gave me," I said. He watched the flame flicker. "Does it still count if you found it?" I looked at him, thought about that for a while. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe finding it is its own kind of gift." A few days after finding the candle, I received another letter. This one wasn't typed, it was handwritten in the blocky, almost architectural print my father used to sketch out garage repairs or mark up blueprints. The envelope was unsealed, no stamp. It must have been slipped into our mailbox by hand. Inside, on plain white paper. I kept the candle because I thought I'd mess it up. I didn't know how to say I was proud. I still don't. But I was. I am. I see you. Dad. I read it once, then again, and again. Each sentence felt like a beam in a house I never thought he'd help me build. They weren't graceful, they didn't flow, but they stood. Solid. Honest. I sat on the porch for a long time, the letter in my lap, sun beginning to set over the trees. The wind moved gently through the branches, and for once I didn't feel like I was bracing against it. When Noah got home from school, he saw the letter beside me and asked, "Did he write you back again?" "Yeah," I said. "He did. Is it better this time?" I nodded. "It's not everything, but it's something real." Noah thought about that. Then quietly he sat beside me, resting his head on my arm. "Maybe he's learning too," he said. The next Sunday, I returned to the house, alone this time. My father was in the garage, seated on the workbench, wiping his hands with an old rag. I stood in the doorway. He looked up, nodded once. "You got it?" he asked. I held the letter up. "I did." He didn't move. Didn't gesture for me to sit or come closer, but after a moment he said, "I meant it." I looked at him. The same man who once told me crying was weakness, who never once said "I'm proud of you" until now, through pen and paper and far too many years. "Thank you," I said. He gave a short nod, looked back at his hands. Then, "Noah's good with tools, got a steady grip." It was a peace offering, small but meaningful. "He wants to build a new shelf for his room," I said. He asked if I'd teach him. My father looked up, eyes meeting mine. "You should, he listens to you." And in that single sentence I heard what I had waited my whole life to hear, not just that I was seen, but that I was enough to pass something on, not broken, not lacking, just a father. One who had learned, painfully and slowly, to give his son what he never received. We didn't talk much after that. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no father and son fishing trip, no sudden outpouring of affection, just the occasional nod, a shared task in the garage, a new quiet that didn't feel hostile anymore. That was enough for me. I stopped waiting for him to become the man I needed when I was a boy. Instead, I focused on being that man for Noah. One afternoon, while sorting tools in the garage, Noah asked, "Did Grandpa ever teach you how to do this stuff?" I paused. "Not exactly," I said. "I learned by watching and messing up a lot." He looked at me serious. "But you still came back out here even after messing up." "Yeah," I said. "I guess I just wanted to be near him, even if he didn't say much." He nodded slowly. "You're different. You talk to me." I smiled. "I want to know who you are, not just what you can do." And there it was, the difference between us. My father built things. I wanted to build people. And Noah was already showing me what was possible when love wasn't hidden behind shame. That week we started on the shelf for his room. He measured twice, just like I'd taught him. His hands moved with intention, focus. But halfway through, the drill bit snapped and he stepped back, frustrated. "I ruined it," he said. I saw his eyes flick toward me, waiting, for anger, for disappointment, for withdrawal. I walked over, picked up the broken bit. It happens. Every builder breaks something. The good ones keep going. He stared at me. "Even Grandpa?" "Especially Grandpa," I said quietly. He just never said it out loud. He smiled a little, and we kept going. Later that night, he showed Marlene the shelf. "We made it together," he said proudly. "And Dad says it's okay if it's not perfect." Marlene looked at me with something soft in her eyes, something like gratitude, or maybe relief. And I realized the real inheritance wasn't the tools, it wasn't the candle. It wasn't even the letter. It was this. The decision to break the cycle, quietly, patiently, one conversation at a time. It was early spring when my father called. Not my mother, not Claire, him. Just his name on my screen made me pause. I picked up. "Hey," he said, voice rougher than usual. "You got a minute?" "Sure." Long silence. Tree in the backyard came down in the wind. Took the fence with it. Thought maybe you and Noah could come help me clear it. I looked out the window. The sky was pale blue. Still. Quiet. I could have said no, but I didn't want to. "We'll be there in an hour." When we arrived, the tree was exactly how I imagined it. Thick, splintered down the center, sprawled across the fence like it had collapsed under years of unsaid things. My father stood beside it with a handsaw already in hand. Noah whistled. "That's huge." My father grunted. "Heavy, too." Took down 3 panels. We worked together in silence, cutting branches, dragging logs to the side, measuring new fence pieces. Sweat on our brows, dirt on our hands. No tension, no raised voices, just the rhythm of shared labor. At one point, Noah stepped inside for water, and I found myself alone with him. We leaned against the trunk, breathing heavily. "Didn't think it'd hold this long," he said, nodding at the fence. "Some things hold longer than they should," I replied. He looked at me, eyes steady. Not defensive, just open. I didn't know how to be the kind of dad you needed. It wasn't an excuse, it was a confession. "I know," I said. He sighed. "I used to think you were soft, but now I see you're just kind. And I don't know where you got that from." I thought about it for a moment. Maybe from the parts of you that never got used. He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. Later, as we packed up, Noah ran over, holding a piece of bark shaped like a crooked heart. "I'm keeping this," he said, "for my shelf." My father chuckled. "You got a lot of room on that thing?" "Yep," Noah said proudly. "And it's sturdy. My dad built it with me." He looked at me when he said it, like he wanted my father to hear it too. And he did. He heard it, and for once he didn't turn away from it. Another Sunday came. No formal invite, no planned dinner. But this time, I was the one who reached out. "We're grilling next weekend," I texted. "If you and Mom want to stop by." A full day passed before he responded. "We'll be there." I didn't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the tree, or the letter, or the silence between us finally softening. But something told me it was time to try again, on my terms. When they arrived, Noah ran out to meet them. My mother hugged me like she'd been holding her breath since Christmas. My father gave me a single nod. "Smells good," he said, glancing toward the grill. "Noah's marinade," I said. "I just turned the meat." That made him smile, barely, but it was there. We sat in the backyard, paper plates on our laps, lemonade sweating in our cups. The wind rustled through the trees like a gentle applause for how far we'd come. Noah pulled out a folder from inside. "School project," he explained. "We had to do a family tree." He opened it and showed us the branches. There was my name, Marlene's, my parents', Claire's, aunts, uncles, cousins, and at the bottom corner, he'd taped the piece of bark he found in Grandpa's yard. "It's not part of the tree," he said, "but it's what fell and brought us together to fix it." The table went quiet. My father stared at the page for a long time. Then, carefully, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out something small. It was the candle, still unused. He placed it on the table between us. "I thought maybe—" "Noah should have it now," he said, voice soft, "since he knows how to light things up." Noah looked at me, unsure. I nodded. "Go ahead." He took the candle gently, like it was something sacred. And in a way, it was. Later that evening, as the sun dropped below the trees and shadows stretched across the grass, we lit it. Just for a moment. No big speech, no dramatic music. Just the three of us, me, my father, and my son, watching the flame flicker in the dusk. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about honoring what survived, and choosing again and again to stay. It's been a year since that dinner. My father still doesn't say much. He never will. But something between us has shifted, like a door that was once bolted shut now creaks open just enough to let in air and maybe light. He and Noah see each other more often. They fix things together, talk about baseball. My father shows him old tools, even lets him keep one in his backpack for emergencies, which Noah takes more seriously than he probably should. I still have the letter he typed, still have the candle wrapper, still keep the photo from the attic on my desk. Me, 5 years old, mud on my face, smiling like someone who believed the world had room for him. Some nights, after everyone's gone to bed, I sit with those pieces of the past and realize they're not as heavy anymore. I'm no longer waiting for something that may never come. Instead, I'm building something else. Noah's shelf is now covered with objects, school projects, small carvings, a crooked clay bowl he made in art class. And in the center, always, sits the bark from the tree and the candle. Sometimes I catch him staring at it, and I wonder if he knows what he's inherited. Not the trauma, not the silence, but the choice to begin again. A few weeks ago, we hosted a dinner. Claire came. My mother. Even my father, who brought pie from a store and insisted he made it himself, which fooled no one. After we ate, Noah stood quietly and said, "I'm just glad everyone's here, that's all." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. Because when you've lived through absence, presence becomes its own kind of miracle. That night, after the house was quiet, I stood outside under the porch light. My father came out beside me, hands in his pockets. We didn't say anything for a while. Then he cleared his throat. "You turned out better than I expected," he said. "Better than I deserved." I looked at him, not with anger, not with ache, but with the calm that comes when you stop needing things to be perfect, to be real. "I did my best," I said. He nodded. "That's more than I ever did." He walked back inside, and I stayed there, watching the stars blink above our quiet little street, a street where hurt had lived, but where healing had started to grow. The candle in Noah's room burned low that night, and for once no one needed to say anything. We had already said enough. If this story stirred something in you, if at any point you felt a lump in your throat or thought of someone in your family, then leave a comment. It doesn't have to be long. Just write, "I understand," or "This story is mine too." Your voice matters. It might be the quiet comfort someone else needs to read today. Share this video with a family member. It might feel hard. It might be necessary. Sometimes a story is the first step toward a conversation that's never happened. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Raw, emotional, and deeply human. And now, click on the next video that's already on your screen. It might finish what this one started inside you.